So when Parliament passed the Stamp Act, immediately in the colonies, a number of writers published essays, published pamphlets with very long and involved arguments attacking the Stamp Act. And these were well-educated lawyers and politicians. Sometimes they wrote under their own names, like James Otis Jr. or John Dickinson. Sometimes they wrote under pseudonyms. But what was common to these pamphlets was kind of the learned nature of their expositions against the Stamp Act. They ranged back into English history and English law to argue against the Stamp Act. And you have to keep in mind that a large proportion of the people in the colonies were uneducated. They couldn't necessarily read. And even many of those who were literate were not educated enough that they could follow these arguments. So these lawyers and politicians writing pamphlets and essays were essentially writing for each other. In order to have any chance of convincing Parliament to rescind the Stamp Act, the leaders, the patriots, groups like the Loyal Nine in Boston, later to become the Sons of Liberty, they understood that they had to popularize protests. They had to democratize dissent. And they did that by really a stroke of genius. They, in Boston, where most of this started, they enlisted the help of a fellow named Ebenezer McIntosh, who was a shoemaker and the leader of a large group of what would you call, I guess, blue-collar workers. They were artisans, they were ship workers, things like that, and he was their leader. And Ebenezer McIntosh and his group put up effigies of the British Prime Minister and the local stamp distributor, along with an effigy of the devil. And this happened on August 14th, 1765. And as people came into the city of Boston on Market Day that morning, they had to pass by this huge elm tree from which were hanging the effigies. And over the course of the day, thousands of people came out, people who would have never read a pamphlet or an essay. And, over the course of months, this tree, which was later dedicated as the Tree of Liberty, became the forum, a public forum for all kinds of meetings and mock trials of the Stamp Act and speeches and so forth, and more effigies, parades around town. All these things involved symbolic speech, the effigies, the Liberty Tree, the parades, the demonstrations, dressing up in all kinds of uniforms to mock the British. And it popularized dissent. It brought people out, not only the men who could vote, but also women and children and people who did not normally participate in the political process. And that showed the kind of depth of opposition to the Stamp Act that quickly persuaded Parliament that they needed to do something. The colonies were not going to pay this tax. They were going to boycott. They were opposed to it strongly, and so they rescinded the tax. Liberty